We're here today to talk about, well, a true giant of American cinema,
Hmm.
a film that is just constantly analyzed and celebrated.
Absolutely. We are talking about 1942's Casablanca.
And it's a film that, it really operates on a couple of different levels.
It does. On one hand, it's this beautiful, tragic romance, but on the other, it's this incredibly powerful political document, a snapshot of a very specific moment in history.
And you always hear it mentioned, right? Year after year, it's on those greatest films lists.
Consistently. The American Film Institute, for example, they almost always have it right near the top. I believe it currently ranks at number 3.
That lasting influence is exactly what we want to explore.
Right.
And our goal today is to completely sidestep the familiar plot. We are not going to spend time dissecting the love triangle between Rick, Ilsa, and Laszlo.
No, and we're not going to treat the final scene's outcome like it's some new revelation.
Exactly. Instead, we want to focus on everything else, all the surrounding details.
The things that explain why this film is what it is, the accidental genius behind it, the chaotic production.
The incredible circumstances of the cast, and just the cultural legacy that has cemented its status.
We're really looking for those surprising insights, the things that explain why a film that was, a solid but not spectacular hit in 1942
Grew into this eternal, universally treasured phenomenon.
It's the story of how a masterpiece was essentially cobbled together by accident under the immense pressure of wartime anxiety and somehow transcended all of it.
Okay, so let's start unpacking this by looking at the people who are actually standing in Rick's Cafe American. Because this feels like the crucial starting point where the history of World War II just bleeds directly onto the screen.
To really get the power of Casablanca, you first have to understand that palpable sense of dread and urgency that just fills Rick's Cafe.
The film is set in French Morocco during World War II,
Mhm.
and it's all about these refugees.
Desperately trying to get transit papers to escape the Nazis, to get to Lisbon. And that emotional weight you feel, it's not just acting, it's authentic.
And when you start digging into the cast list, especially the supporting actors and the extras, that reality really hits you.
It does. The film used an overwhelmingly international cast.
Right. I read that if you check the credits, the list of American-born actors is, well, incredibly short.
It's tiny. Only 3 of the credited actors, Humphrey Bogart, Dooley Wilson, who played Sam, and Joy Page, were born in the United States.
Just 3.
That's it. Everyone else came from somewhere else.
And a lot of them weren't just international actors. They were European exiles. They were refugees.
Exactly. They were living the very same terrifying reality that their characters were facing on screen. Their presence was, in a way, an accident of circumstance.
A wartime necessity.
A wartime necessity, but it gave the film an emotional authenticity that Hollywood could never, ever have manufactured.
That's just astonishing. The extras, the people in the background, they weren't just portraying this desperate situation. They were survivors of it.
Absolutely. I mean, think about the sheer amount of talent that had fled Europe with the rise of Hitler.
Yeah.
You had actors like Louis V. Arco, Trude Berliner, Ilka Grunig.
And Marcel Dalio, who played Emile the Croupier.
Yes, and his story is particularly powerful. He was Jewish and had managed to escape Paris in 1940, fleeing through Lisbon before he finally landed in Hollywood.
It's just like the characters in the film.
Just like them. And many of these actors, while they were filming these scenes, were actively searching for relatives they'd lost track of, relatives who were still in concentration camps.
That completely changes how you watch the film.
Yeah.
The fear you see in their eyes, it isn't just dramatic flair.
No, it's lived trauma.
And there's that famous story about the Duel of the Anthems scene.
The most often cited example of this authenticity. It's that moment where Major Strasser's officers start singing a German song, and Victor Laszlo defiantly leads the cafe in a powerful rendition of La Marseillaise.
Drowning out the Germans.
Yes, and a witness who was there during the filming, they recalled this incredibly profound moment where they looked around and noticed that many of the actors, especially the extras at the tables in the bar, they were weeping.
Real tears.
Real tears. And the witness said they suddenly realized they were all real refugees.
That visceral response where the line between the scene and reality just dissolves, it must have been overwhelming.
Our author once wrote that that level of understanding and desperation could never have been achieved through, central casting.
It was a testament to the raw human experience that was flooding into Hollywood at that exact moment.
It was. But this necessity also created some profound and very difficult ironies, especially within the main cast.
You're talking about Conrad Veidt, who played the main villain, Major Strasser.
He's the best example. Veidt was a famous German expressionist actor, and here he is portraying the face of Nazism.
But in reality, he was a refugee himself. He had fled the regime.
That's right. He left Germany with his Jewish wife, Ilona Prager, specifically because he was opposed to the Nazis.
Yet in America, he kept getting cast as the enemy.
Frequently.
Well,
Because of his accent and his German status. And it's also worth noting that despite his second billing on the poster, Veidt was actually the highest paid member of the entire cast.
more than Bogart.
More than Bogart. He earned $25,000, which was a substantial sum back then. It really speaks to his established reputation. Sadly, he passed away not long after the film came out.
So you have this layer of authentic desperation from the refugee actors, and then this layer of professional irony with someone like Veidt.
And the tension wasn't just confined to the politics. There was, by all accounts, a lot of friction among the stars themselves.
The Hollywood lore is filled with stories about the tension between Bogart, Bergman, and Paul Henreid.
Paul Henreid, who played the noble resistance fighter Victor Laszlo, apparently viewed Bogart, the ultimate on-screen cynic, as just a mediocre actor.
And Ingrid Bergman, who was this huge rising star, she wasn't too impressed with Henreid either, was she?
No, she reportedly called him a prima donna on set.
And Henreid himself, who was an Austrian immigrant, he had his own reservations about playing Laszlo.
He did. He was worried the part would set him as a stiff forever. He was afraid of being typecast as this noble but, a somewhat unromantic hero figure.
It's interesting because that internal tension might have actually helped the dynamic on screen. The chemistry between Rick and Ilsa feels so electric.
Well, the relationship between Ilsa and Laszlo feels much more formal, more dutiful.
That very stiffness that Henreid was worried about became an essential part of Laszlo's character.
It did. And then you have Ilsa Lund, which became Ingrid Bergman's most famous and enduring role. But she wasn't the first choice, was she?
Not at all. Other major actresses were considered.
Anne Sheridan, Hedy Lamarr, Louise Rayner, they were all in the running.
So how did Bergman get the part?
It was a classic piece of Golden Age studio maneuvering. Bergman was under contract to David O. Selznick. The producer, Hal Wallace, basically had to rent her.
What did he have to give up?
He agreed to lend one of his own stars, Olivia de Havilland, to Selznick in exchange for Bergman's services.
These star swaps, they highlight just how much power the studios had. The deal often mattered more than the artistic fit.
It did. And before we move on from the cast, we have to mention Madeleine Lubeau.
She played Yvonne, Rick's initial discarded girlfriend.
And she's the one who delivers that powerful, tearful line, Vive la France, during the anthem scene. She was a French refugee who had fled Nazi-occupied Europe with her husband.
Who was Marcel Dalio, the croupier we mentioned earlier.
Exactly. And Lebeau is actually the last surviving credited cast member. She passed away in 2016. Her presence in that moment just encapsulates the entire film's emotional core.
And finally, Sam, the pianist, played by Dooley Wilson. His character is the anchor of the film's entire romantic history.
He is, and yet his performance is one of Hollywood's most beloved illusions.
Right, because Dooley Wilson wasn't a pianist.
Not at all. He was a drummer.
It's one of those facts that just blows your mind the first time you hear it.
It is. The actual piano playing you hear was supplied by another musician, Gene Plummer, who was playing just off camera.
And it gets even more remarkable than that.
It does. Producer Hal Wallace seriously considered dubbing over Wilson's singing voice for As Time Goes By.
He didn't think it was good enough.
He felt it wasn't professional enough for a major motion picture.
The idea of replacing that voice, the voice that is so tied to the film's memory, it's almost sacrilege now.
It is, but it just underscores a crucial point. Even in a film that we praise for its realism and its authentic casting, there's always Hollywood magic and, a bit of deception at work, right alongside genuine life and death experience.
That illusion of effortless greatness, it leads us straight into the next major point.
Which is that the production of Casablanca was anything but effortless.
This is a masterpiece forged in chaos.
Complete organizational chaos, and it was severely constrained by the strict moral standards of the era.
So you're telling me that a film that is renowned for its perfect, complex, integrated script was basically patched together?
It really was. Nobody involved thought this film was going to be anything special. It was a B picture schedule with an A picture budget. It was rushed, it went over budget.
And the script was being rewritten constantly.
Sometimes just hours before they shot the scenes. The whole thing started with an unproduced play called Everybody Comes to Rick's.
By Murray Burnett and Joan Allison.
Right. And the origins of that play are deeply rooted in the actual political turmoil of the time.
They had traveled to Europe in 1938.
They did, and they were profoundly shaken by what they saw, especially the anti-Semitism right after the Anschluss.
The German annexation of Austria.
And that context is so vital. The Anschluss showed Europe that Nazi expansion was real and it wasn't stopping.
So that fear pushed them south.
Exactly. They ended up in a multinational nightclub, probably in the south of France. And it was filled with real exiles and refugees, all sharing that frantic desperation to escape.
And that club and its owner became the blueprint for Rick's Cafe.
The cynical but secretly moral owner? Yes, that became the prototype.
So when Warner Bros. Bought the rights in January 1942, they paid a huge price for it, didn't they?
An unprecedented price for an unproduced play, $20,000.
Which is the equivalent of what today? Over $300,000.
All over. A story analyst named Stephen Carnot first approved it, calling it sophisticated hokum. Then the story editor, Irene Diamond, she championed it to Hal Wallace, who snapped it up, understanding its timely appeal.
And the name change to Casablanca that shows they weren't exactly confident in its inherent greatness.
No, that was pure marketing. They were just imitating the success of a 1938 film called Algiers, which also used an exotic North African setting.
They also made a strategic choice about the timeline.
Yes, setting it before Pearl Harbor. That allowed Rick's initial cynicism and his isolationism to resonate more clearly with the pre-war American mindset.
Okay, let's talk about this War of the Writers. There are 3 credited writers.
Julius and Philip Epstein and Howard Koch. And their process was unbelievably chaotic.
A true relay race, I've heard.
It was. And they never worked in the same room at the same time. The Epstein brothers were the primary architects of the tone. They added most of that brilliant, witty dialogue.
But then they had to leave.
They were pulled away by Frank Capra to work on his very patriotic Why We Fight documentary series.
So Howard Koch steps in to take over.
Yes, and Koch wrote about 30 or 40 pages, but he focused much more heavily on the political and anti-fascist elements. That was his strength.
But when the Epsteins came back?
They mostly just disregarded what Koch had written and went back to their focus on the romance and the human interest. It was a huge creative divide.
And yet, somehow, the final script feels, as Roger Ebert said, wonderfully unified and consistent. How did they reconcile those two opposing forces?
Koch himself said it was the result of a tug of war. His version was all political melodrama, but the director, Michael Curtiz, he pushed just as hard for the romance.
Right, he was the one who insisted on the Paris flashbacks.
Which were not in the original play. Curtiz knew they needed that backstory to explain Rick's motivation.
So the tension we see on screen between politics and romance, between duty and desire, that was actually happening in the writer's room.
It was. That conflict forced the synthesis. And we also can't forget the uncredited writer, Casey Robinson.
He specialized in women's pictures.
And he came in for 3 weeks just to polish the script. He particularly helped with the emotional texture of those cafe scenes between Rick and Ilsa to make sure the chemistry was undeniable.
That chaotic process, it fueled one of the most famous myths about the film.
The idea that Ingrid Bergman didn't know which man she would end up with until the very last day of shooting.
Was that actually true?
Well, the writers definitely struggled with the ending. The famous line, "Round up the usual suspects," was decided on very, very late in the process.
And the airport scene was one of the last things they shot.
It was. So by that time, the historical record shows that Bergman did know the resolution. But the emotional uncertainty she felt was real because the script was changing so quickly and the writers were genuinely debating how it should end.
And that uncertainty was fundamentally driven by an external force.
The motion picture production code? The Hays Code.
Hollywood's self-censorship body.
And it was the single biggest constraint on the plot. The code had strict moral standards. It explicitly forbade showing a woman leaving her husband for another man.
So that famously noble self-sacrificing ending, it was essentially forced on them by a moral rulebook.
Exactly. Rick could not win Elsa by encouraging her to commit adultery. It was impossible. This forced them into the structure where Rick makes the choice for the greater good, and in doing so, he forces Elsa to fulfill her duty to the resistance.
Casey Robinson, the uncredited writer, He framed it perfectly in a memo, didn't he?
He did. He told Hal Wallace that the ending worked because Rick wasn't just solving a love triangle. He was forcing Ilsa to live up to the idealism of her nature.
He was forcing her to carry on with work that was, in his words, far more important than the love of two little people.
It completely reframes Rick's emotional journey as a politically mandated moral victory.
But the censors didn't just focus on the big plot points. They focused on implication, too.
They were meticulously strict about it. Joseph Breen, who ran the Production Code Administration, he objected strongly to two things.
The first was Captain Renault's side business.
The clear suggestion that Renault extorted sexual favors in exchange for exit visas, the idea of official corruption linked to sex, was a huge no-no.
Which would have undermined his noble turn at the end.
Precisely. And second, Breen demanded they delete any direct reference to Rick and Ilsa having slept together in Paris. They had to be very careful how they framed that past relationship.
So all that beautiful elliptical dialogue that only hints at corruption and passion.
It's all a result of a subtle censorship war. All the explicit references were removed. The audience only knows about these things through implication.
Even small lines of dialogue had to be cleaned up.
Yes, the line where Rick tells Sam to stop playing the song. The original version implied a swear word, so it was changed to the famous, "Sam, I thought I told you never to play." These small battles just show how constrained they were. It forced the writers to be creatively suggestive instead of explicit.
That ambiguity, which was born from censorship and clashing writers, it really extends into the entire aesthetic of the film.
It does. When you look at the key production choices, the music, the direction, the visuals, they all define this mood.
And when you talk about the mood of Casablanca, you have to start with the music.
You do, because it's impossible to separate the film from its theme as time goes by. It feels like it was written for this story.
And yet, the composer, Max Steiner, famously hated the song.
He detested it. Steiner was a titan of Hollywood scoring. He did Gone with the Wind, King Kong, and he thought the song was musically unsophisticated. He wanted to replace it with his own composition.
But he couldn't. And the reason is as mundane as an actress's schedule and a haircut.
That's the irony. Ingrid Bergman had already cut her hair short for her next role in For Whom the Bell Tolls.
Which meant reshooting the Paris flashbacks, where Rick and Elsa first hear the song, was impossible.
Utterly impossible. If they changed the song, they'd have to scrap or reshoot those key scenes, and they couldn't do that with her new look.
So Steiner was forced to use this tune he hated. He had to build the entire score around it, and La Marseillaise.
And he adapted. He's a genius. He transformed as time goes by into different instrumental arrangements, using it as a leitmotif, a recurring theme, to reflect Rick and Ilsa's changing moods.
He later admitted the song must have had something.
He did, with some humility. His genius was in accepting that constraint and weaving it into a masterpiece.
And that music was so crucial to the propaganda element of the film, especially in the Duel of the Anthems.
One of the most potent emotional moments in the film. It's an overtly political statement.
And the German song the officers sang. That wasn't the first choice, was it?
No. Originally, they planned to use the official Nazi anthem, the Horst Wessel Lied, but they wouldn't.
Why not? Copyright issues, even during a war.
Exactly. The song was still under international copyright protection in non-Allied countries, and Warner Bros. Was afraid of legal or political blowback.
So they swapped it.
They substituted it with a different German patriotic song, Die Wacht am Rhein. It achieved the same anti-Axis effect without the legal risk.
Looking at the visuals, the chaos continued right into the filming process itself. It's very unusual for a big studio movie to be shot almost entirely in sequence.
It is. But that was a direct result of the incomplete, evolving script. They only had the first half of the screenplay ready when filming started in May of 1942.
So they were just rushing along day by day as the writers finished the pages.
Yes, and that pressure caused the film to go over budget by about $75,000. The total cost was just over $1 million, which was above average for the time.
That puts a lot of pressure on the director, Michael Curtiz. He was known as a great visual stylist, but maybe not a great storyteller.
That's the common assessment. One of the writers said Curtiz knew nothing whatever about story. He saw it in pictures, and you supplied the stories.
And that focus on the visual, on the atmosphere, is key.
His style, with its low-key, shadowy film noir lighting and expressionistic angles, it perfectly reflected the moral ambiguity of the setting.
And his cinematographer, Arthur Edison, was incredibly focused on how Ingrid Bergman was framed.
Edison was a veteran who'd shot movies like Frankenstein.
Hmm.
He was told to maximize Bergman's beauty and her emotional vulnerability.
So she was almost always filmed from her left side, her preferred side.
Yes, and often with a softening gauze filter. They also used special catch lights to create a sparkle in her eyes, giving her face this ineffably sad and tender and nostalgic look.
It's all about creating that aura of tragic beauty. Meanwhile, behind the camera, they were using some very simple, low-tech solutions.
The famous height difference between Bogart and Bergman is the perfect example.
She was taller than him.
By about 2 inches. So in their scenes together, Curtiz had Bogart stand on blocks or sit on cushions just to minimize that difference.
A wonderful reminder that even the greatest dramas often depend on simple, practical tricks.
And the most iconic production trick has to be that final airport scene. It feels so huge, so windswept and foggy.
And yet it was all shot on a studio lot.
Pure illusion. All the street scenes, Rick's Cafe, it was all built on the Warner Bros. Lot. The exterior street was actually recycled from another movie, The Desert Song.
And for that final airport scene, they use a cardboard plane.
A proportionate cardboard model of a Lockheed Electra Jr., and they used little people as extras to create the illusion of distance and scale.
In the fog, which is so integral to the mood of that farewell.
The fog was applied deliberately to disguise how unconvincing the model airplane and the artificial backdrop really were. It's a classic case where a limitation ended up creating a perfect aesthetic.
And finally, the release of the film. The timing was pure marketing genius.
Warner Bros. Was masterful with this. They rushed the world premiere for November 26, 1942, in New York.
And why that date?
It was calculated to capitalize on Operation Torch, the Allied invasion and capture of the real Casablanca, which had happened just a few weeks earlier.
So the city was suddenly all over the front pages.
Exactly. And the general national release was timed just as carefully. It was January 23, 1943.
To coincide with the Casablanca conference.
Precisely. The high-level meeting between Churchill and Roosevelt in the newly captured city. Every time the public saw the name Casablanca in a headline, the movie was relevant.
That's brilliant synchronization. But did it always play well with the military itself?
Not entirely. Despite its clear anti-Axis message, the Office of War Information actually banned the film from being shown to troops in North Africa.
Why? That seems counterintuitive.
It was a matter of sensitivity. They were worried the film might cause resentment among French Vichy supporters in the region.
Right. Can you just clarify what a Vichy supporter was in this context?
Of course. The Vichy regime was the collaborationist government in the southern, unoccupied part of France after the German invasion, and they technically governed French colonies like Morocco.
So a Vichy supporter was someone aligned with them.
Yes. And the film's portrayal of Vichy officials like Captain Renault as corrupt and, cozy with the Nazis was accurate propaganda, but it was politically tricky for Allied forces trying to manage the situation on the ground in North Africa.
So we have this film. It's a rushed, chaotic, inventive, and politically opportune production. But its greatness. It wasn't instantly recognized, was it?
No, that's the key paradox. It got consistently good reviews. The New York Times said it made the spine tingle and the heart take a leap. It was a good financial hit, made $3.7 million domestically.
But it wasn't immediately hailed as this moral masterpiece. It was seen as really good wartime entertainment.
Its reputation built slowly, over decades. It needed some kind of external mechanism to keep it fresh in the public's mind, while other great films from the 40s just faded away.
And that mechanism was a tradition at a small theater in Massachusetts.
Yes, the Brattle Theater in Cambridge. Starting in 1957, they began screening the film every year during the final exams week at Harvard University.
And this was pivotal.
It was. It ensured that generation after generation of students who would become future critics, filmmakers, and culture shapers were all introduced to Casablanca. This continuous rediscovery is a huge part of why it remains so culturally potent.
And by the mid-70s, the effect was undeniable.
By 1977, Casablanca had become the single most frequently broadcast film on American television. It had achieved ubiquity.
And that ubiquity translated into critical consensus. Roger Ebert put it perfectly.
He said that while there might be greater movies with more artistic vision, Casablanca is simply one of the movies we treasure the most. He saw its flaws, Han Reed's stiff performance, the artificial sets, but he concluded its emotional power is just unmatched.
A big part of that enduring power is its moral complexity, which resolves itself through sacrifice.
The film historian Rudy Belmer analyzed this so well. He noted that the film starts with characters who are deeply entrenched in moral ambiguity.
Rick is the cynic who sticks his neck out for nobody.
And Renault is the corrupt collaborator who kills Ugarte to maintain his position.
By the end, they've all completed this profound moral journey.
Exactly. The final act, driven by the needs of the war, forces them to choose. And by the end, as Bilmer says, everybody is sacrificing for the greater good.
Rick sacrifices his love. Ilsa sacrifices her desire for duty.
And Renault sacrifices his comfortable position to join the Free French. That movement from self-interest to selfless commitment is the film's enduring theme. It perfectly echoed America's own journey into the war.
But the true measure of its cultural footprint have to be its dialogue.
If you gauge influence by how often a film is quoted, Casablanca is in a league of its own.
It holds the record for the most quotes on the American Film Institute's list of 100 movie quotes.
6 lines, which is an astonishing number when you compare it to Gone with the Wind or The Wizard of Oz, which tied for second place with 3 quotes each.
Let's just run through them because they're so baked into our cultural language now.
The first, and maybe the most intimate, is, "Here's looking at you, kid,"
which is said 4 times in the film.
And it's interesting, that line wasn't even in the screenplay. It's widely believed to be something Bogart would say to Bergman between takes.
A genuine off-the-cuff moment that made it in.
Then there's the final line. Louis, I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship.
Third, play it, Sam. Play as time goes by.
Fourth, round up the usual suspects.
Fifth, the romantic epitaph. We'll always have Paris.
And sixth, that iconic statement of fate. Of all the gin joints in all the towns in all the world, she walks into mine.
And of course, we have to address the most famous misquote in movie history.
The line that is not in the film.
Play it again, Sam.
Never spoken by anyone. It's a total cultural invention.
The actual lines are close, though.
They are. Ilsa says, "Play it once, Sam, for old time's sake," and then, "Play it, Sam, play as time goes by." And later Rick says, "You played it for her, you can play it for me," and then, "If she can stand it, I can. Play it."
So the word again just sort of embedded itself in the collective memory.
It did, perhaps popularized later by the Woody Allen movie.
The film's success culminated at the 1943 Academy Awards. It was nominated for 8 Oscars.
And won 3 majors: Best Picture, Best Director for Michael Curtiz, and Best Adapted Screenplay.
But even that moment was marked by the chaos and tension that defined the whole production.
Yes, specifically the bitter feud between the producer, Hal B. Wallace, and the studio head, Jack L. Warner.
This is a legendary Hollywood power struggle. What happened at the ceremony?
It was a public humiliation for Wallace. When the award for Best Picture was announced, Wallace, the producer who had championed the film from the very beginning, he stood up to accept the award.
But he never made it to the stage.
Before he could even get there, Jack L. Warner, the studio head, rushed past him.
He physically blocked him.
Yes. Warner just barreled past Wallace, snatched the Oscar, and gave the acceptance speech with what Wallace later called a broad, flashing smile and a look of great self-satisfaction.
Now, isn't it common for the studio head to accept Best Picture?
Mm-hmm.
Why was this so specifically humiliating?
Because Wallace saw it as a deliberate personal snub. He felt Casablanca was his creation. He felt Warner had done nothing but sign the checks. To have his moment of recognition stolen so publicly was devastating.
He said he never recovered from the shock.
He didn't. And that incident was the final straw. He left Warner Bros. Just a few months later and started a legendary career as an independent producer.
The film's density and its success, despite all that chaos, has naturally led to endless academic study. It's a film that just invites dissection.
And one of the most famous and provocative interpretations comes from the Italian semiotician Umberto Eco.
Right. He claimed that by any strict critical standards, Casablanca is a very mediocre film.
Which sounds like a pretty definitive dismissal.
So how does he square that with the film's greatness? Is he arguing that it's great because it's bad?
In a way, he argues its power comes from the fact that it's an anthology, a collection of cinematic archetypes and cliches.
All the classic tropes.
All of them. Eco said the film works because the cliches burst in shamelessly, and they feel like they're talking among themselves and celebrating a reunion.
So its greatness isn't in its originality, but in its synthesis of every powerful trope Hollywood had.
Exactly. You've got the cynical loner with a past, the femme fatale trapped by duty, the noble rival, the corrupt but redeemable official.
The faithful servant, the doomed romance.
It combines all these universally understood stories, and by doing so, it achieves a narrative force that goes beyond any individual plot point. It reaches what Eco called Homeric depths. It just hits every note we recognize from classic storytelling.
And the political allegory is just as strong. One of the writers, Howard Coe, he championed this view.
Yes, Koch directly compared Rick Blaine to President Franklin D. Roosevelt.
Rick starts as a neutralist.
A cynical neutralist running his casino, gambling on world events, refusing to commit. He's only forced to engage when his own history and moral code make him close his casino, which represents ending partisan politics, and commit to the right side.
And the title, Casablanca, subtly reinforces that.
It does. Casablanca literally means White House. It strengthens that connection to Roosevelt and the decisive American choice to enter the war, to abandon neutrality for moral commitment. For a wartime audience, that theme resonated profoundly.
The film's political relevance is also shown by how different countries edited or even banned it.
The political sensitivity was immense. In 1943, Ireland banned the film entirely.
Why?
They argued it infringed on their wartime neutrality by portraying Vichy France and Nazi Germany in a sinister light. The ban wasn't lifted until 1945.
But the most stunning example of political revisionism came years later. In Germany.
The West German version released in 1952 is a masterpiece of sanitization. They wanted to remove all political connections to World War II and the Nazis, so they cut 25 minutes from the film.
25 minutes. What did they change?
They changed everything. Victor Laszlo was no longer a resistance fighter fleeing a concentration camp. In this version, he's a Norwegian atomic physicist being pursued by Interpol for his scientific secrets.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
They took the Nazis out of a Nazi-era movie.
Completely. The version was utterly incomprehensible. It wasn't until 1975 that a full, unedited version was finally released in Germany.
And given its success, of course, Hollywood tried to recreate the magic with sequels and remakes.
The appetite was there almost right away. A sequel called Brazzaville was planned, which would have followed Rick and Renault as they went off to join the Free French.
Why did that never happen?
I think ultimately Wallace and the writers realized they had caught lightning in a bottle. They understood that the perfect, ambiguous ending of Casablanca was a huge part of its power. Continuing the story would have risked undermining it.
And later attempts to recapture that atmosphere,
Yeah.
they didn't go well.
No. Films like Cabo Blanco in 1980 or Havana in 1990 were critically and commercially panned. It just proved the original magic was accidental and you couldn't reproduce it.
Then we have the great controversy of the 1980s, colorization.
A massive critical failure. It was commissioned by Ted Turner, and while the technology was considered state-of-the-art, critics were furious.
Because the film's aesthetic, that moody black and white cinematography, it's fundamental to its identity.
It is. Bogart's son, Stephen, gave the definitive critique. He asked, if you're going to colorize Casablanca, why not put arms on the Venus de Milo?
That comment just perfectly captures it.
Mhm.
The film's aesthetic is an unchangeable part of its genius.
It is, and thankfully, the film has had a long life in home media, culminating in a beautiful 4K restoration for its 70th anniversary in 2012.
And that restoration was vital because the original camera negative doesn't exist anymore.
Right. The work had to be sourced from a nitrate print.
What exactly is a nitrate print, and why does that matter?
Nitrate film stock was the standard in early cinema. It offered incredible visual clarity, but it was also highly flammable and volatile, literally explosive.
So storage is dangerous.
Very. And because the original negative was lost, restorers had to rely on the best surviving archival prints, which were often these physically unstable nitrate prints. It required incredibly meticulous, careful digital scanning to get that 4K clarity.
And the film lives on not just through preservation, but through its direct influence on other media, right up to today.
Absolutely. Its influence is endless. The neo-noir, The Usual Suspects, takes its title from Renault's line. Woody Allen's Play It. Again, Sam is an extended homage.
And more recently, La La Land.
La La Land intentionally incorporated allusions to Casablanca in its imagery, its dialogue, and even its plot structure, especially that selfless ending where the characters sacrifice their relationship for their ambitions. It remains the essential reference point for romance, cynicism, and sacrifice in cinema.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? We've looked past the familiar plot, and instead, we focused on the chaotic history. The film's excellence was achieved almost by accident.
Through the authenticity of a cast full of real refugees, bringing a palpable desperation.
Through writers who were working against each other and against the rigid constraints of the censors.
And through a brilliant marketing rush timed to the Allied invasion of North Africa.
We've established that the film's enduring power isn't just in what it shows, but in the universality of its care theme.
The ability of individuals to sacrifice their personal happiness for a greater global cause. Ingrid Bergman herself once reflected on it. She said, "There is something mystical about it. It seems to have filled a need that was there before the film, a need that the film filled."
It speaks to that eternal choice between personal love and universal duty.
It does.
And that concept, that it filled an existing need for a narrative of noble sacrifice, it leads to our final thought for you to consider. Rick Blaine's decision at the end, forcing Ilsa to board that plane, it wasn't just solving a complex romantic problem.
It was forcing her and himself to live up to a higher wartime ideal.
It suggests that perhaps, in the face of the biggest, most world-altering moments, solving a love triangle truly can amount to more than a hill of beans when it's framed against the fight for global freedom. Thanks for listening.